Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Plotlines. I'm your host, Connor, and today we're going to be talking about The Lord of the Rings and all things Tolkien news. So we'll see where it goes, but I've sort of got a setup for us today, and I am joined today by Rick Barrett.
Connor, it is always a pleasure to be here, my friend. Thank you every time. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, for all of you, just so you know, I have uh, links in the description to Rick's newest channel, the Daily Mag Dump, and as well as the news from the Pew.
And thank you so much, Connor, for subscribing, buddy. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. It's
No
a huge
problem.
help.
I'm not the most knowledgeable on guns, but you're gonna give me the information that I need.
I take that charge very seriously. So once again, thank you for the faith in doing that. And I'm happy to talk about Lord of the Rings and Tolkien and all that kind of stuff. So it should be a fun show.
Yeah, maybe we'll have another episode one day about Catholics and guns. I think that would be an epic show as well.
Always
So
happy to talk it.
awesome. So we got Tolkien news that may have surprised a lot of people. I know I was quite surprised by the news that there was new Lord of the Rings movies in the works, and we're going to get to that a little bit later down the line. I first want to I want to focus on the Tolkien estate and how they have been affecting the adaptations that have come out recently. But Rick, first, what was your reaction to seeing that new Lord of the Rings movies were coming out?
I think I had the same reaction that everybody else had. The no, why can't you just leave it alone? Just can you just please have this one thing? Let us have this. But at the same time, we knew this was coming because the group that's behind this, it's called the Embracer Group. They kind of mentioned they were going to do this a while back when they purchased the film rights to Lord of the Rings. And they actually got their hands on that stuff from Middle Earth Enterprises. They kind of they lease it out and so forth. So last August, Embracer bought the Middle Earth film rights from the Oscar producer, the late producer Saul Zentes, I believe is the name. So and at first they came out and everybody was really freaking out because they said, we're going to have a Gandalf spinoff and we're going to have an Aragorn spinoff and we're going to have like a Samwise the Gamgee. They were going to Star Wars the heck out of this thing. And there was just going to be spinoffs. And everybody went, oh, this franchise is dead now too. This IP is destroyed too now because of this. But it's also funny now with this announcement today, and we'll get into it during the show. And by the way, the Embracer Group is some Swedish video game company. They're based out of Karlstad, Sweden. So they're just big mega conglomerate, and so people were worried about that. But now the announcement today looks like they learned from what happened, and we'll talk about it with Rings of Power, and B are more than happy to dance on the grave of one Jeff Bezos as they will try to make a better product than he did.
Maybe Bezos' son is responsible for this, because I know Bezos' son was basically like, you better get Lord of the Rings right,
Yep.
Dad, or
Yep.
or so help me. So maybe he's behind it.
Maybe that was the big thing that Bezos did during his film rounds, or during his press rounds for this. He said, "I love it so much because blah blah blah. My son told me you better not blank this up," and
Yeah.
so that was kind of like his big way to, his peace offering to the fans. And then he gave us, from what I've seen and from your reviews and from everybody else's reviews, just a steaming pile of nonsense.
Yeah, a dumpster fire. But before we get into that, I am drinking Tridentine Brewing right now. It's
From what I hear, it's delicious. I wouldn't know.
it is. It's Saint Joseph themed.
Oh,
Be-
my patron saint too. My patron saint.
so you're
Ugh.
just, I mean,
It's a
Rick,
1-2 punch, Connor. It's a 1-2 punch on me. Come on, man.
you don't drink beer anyway,
I don't. I don't. That is very true.
so you're just failing all over the place.
Hmm.
So,
What can I say? It's Lent. It's part of my suffering for Lent. That's what it is.
but it can't be you're suffering for Lent if you don't normally do so.
Yeah, that's true. Very, very true on that one. You got me.
Indeed. So let's start first of all with Simon Tolkien.
Hmm. The true villain of this story.
If anybody was checking Twitter today, noticed my rant about Simon Tolkien, he really comes across very poorly. So I'm just going to read this last uh, paragraph. So Simon Tolkien is in charge of the Tolkien estate. His father, Christopher Tolkien, died a couple years ago. And then basically he took over. I don't know how that worked, that whole takeover.
Yeah.
Maybe there was a planned succession, but who knows. Anyways, so living in the shadow of the Lord of the Rings has not been an easy experience, and I was always telling myself that I couldn't write fiction. However, I began writing my first novel in January 2000. The first efforts, uh, the first effort was rejected, and that was hard. But I was determined to carry on, and the result was The Stepmother. I think that my grandfather would be both pleased and proud that I've become a novelist. My book is a courtroom drama. It could not be further removed from his world of elves and dwarves, but writing it has made me feel close to my grandfather again. It is as if I have come into my true inheritance. Okay, so Rick, can you give us your first impressions of that?
My first impressions is one of entitlement, that this third generation product of a legendary line has no connection to the thing that he is profiting off of, because he didn't see it, at least with Christopher. And we all kind of looked at Christopher with a lot of esteem, because he was very protective of his dad's legacy. This is my dad's work, and this, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. And he was the knight protecting that fair maiden that is the Lord of the Rings mythology, and that whole world. His son has no connection to that. He didn't see his grandfather write it. What he does see is opportunity. And I will throw this out there. I will throw him a bone in that it's got to be tough when you have this name attached to you and these expectations that are supposedly attached to it. You're a Tolkien, so you must be able to write beautiful novels and fiction and blah 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 blah. And of course, there's two ways you can do that. You can embrace it and say, yes, my granddad did this amazing life altering thing that so many people enjoy, and I take it upon myself, like my father did, to guard this so the people continue to enjoy these works for years and years and years. Or you say, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna I it's cool that my grandfather did Lord of the Rings, but I want to be a writer too. I'm not about that. I'm about me. It's very narcissistic. I'm about me and my journey in my life. So it was like really hard for me to get a book written, which is weird because even Kim Kardashian has a bestseller. So I don't know, buddy, if if it's that hard for you to do. And it looks like he's taking the road of, yeah, it's great that it's there, but it's not my thing. I don't really care about it. I mean, I'll make money off of it. Don't worry about that. I'll never have a hard day in my life, but I don't really have a connection to it. It's kind of like when you have a business that started in a mechanic shop or whatever, hardware store. I think the statistics are, when it's handed over from father to son, they usually go out of business because the child didn't have a stake in it. I mean, they saw it as a thing, but they didn't build it. And I think we're seeing that the first generation that wasn't directly connected to it, and that is this version of Tolkien is going to use it for whatever he can, but he doesn't understand. And I don't think this is Chris's fault. I think Christopher probably did everything he could as his father to say, listen, we're Tolkien's, and this is, your grandfather wrote this. This is his work. This is our legacy. This is what we do. And I think he might have just been influenced by modernity and be like, you find your truth, you find your purpose. And I think that's where we're at.
Well, also that generation, I'm not sure Christopher's generation really knew how to inculcate that type of thing into their children.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that, I think they let their children have far too much reign with when it comes to like goals or sort of where they wanted to go, cuz Simon Tolkien was a lawyer or is a lawyer. Like
Oh,
that
okay.
he's a lawyer by trade. Whether or not, I don't know if he succeeded. Maybe he didn't succeed in law and that's why he
Was
went
trying
into
to write
writing.
books, so obviously, obviously he's not great at it.
Well, yeah. No, but so yeah, so he's a barrister, a lawyer by trade, and so I don't know if he had really. I don't think it was pushed upon him that well, and maybe it was pushed on upon him too much. I don't know. I don't know how one raises someone to be interested in the Tolkien estate. Uh, though
Mm,
I think Christopher should have just sent it to somebody who would have held it more dearly. Kind
yeah.
of how Mother Angelica sent EWTN to people who would care, not or wouldn't destroy her work instead of her order.
Yeah, but you got to understand. I mean, if you have a name, if you have a son, like that's the thing is to pass down a legacy too. And that's the whole point you have kids for is to pass down these legacies. So you feel, even though, I guess you could tell Simon's not into it. Maybe we got to look for other plans, or maybe he hoped when when Christopher died that his son would be like, all right, it's my turn and I got to step up. Because I think as a parent, you have to hope all the way up until the end that your children will want to be a part of that legacy, and to give up on it is really just got to be a terrible thing.
Yeah. Just so you guys know, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Tolkien is trending on Twitter, so if you're on Twitter, share the episode on Twitter so it can get more, can go further and more people can see it and that sort of thing. So, but definitely make sure you like the video so people see it and comment. Let us know what you're thinking in the live chat, but also after the show, leave a comment as well. That helps get this to a lot more people. So thank you for that. And so we have Simon Tolkien, and then we have Christopher Tolkien. Christopher Tolkien was a was had a huge impact or in the Tolkien or in the sort of Middle Earth universe. He helped with the drawings and helped with the business that his father was undertaking. So he was very familiar with everything. He compiled all the work that the remaining work that hadn't been published into volumes, and they're extensive, and it's going to take it'll take a while to read all of that because there are a lot of volumes of stuff that sort of either possibilities that Tolkien didn't go with, or just things that never got published. Tolkien was a perfectionist. He was deeply melancholic. He was going for the optimal thing, and if he didn't feel like it was perfect, he wasn't going to publish it. So really, his son is the reason we have the publications of a lot of a sizable amount of material post humously.
Yeah, and he definitely took that charge, as you just so correctly pointed out. And I think we were all kind of worried about after the Lord of the Rings films and kind of where the Hobbit didn't do great. I mean, it wasn't terrible, especially considering what's come after it. People are like, "Oh man, this is, well, the idea of him being around." People were starting to get worried of that fact after, because he was so integral in keeping his father's legacy alive. So it's definitely sad to see that. But is there no better example, Connor, of the way, we have this fraction, this separation in Western society between the old and the new. And I think there's no better way to describe that or show that than within the Tolkien estate.
Yeah, no, it's a great way of looking at it. The the this sort of this I believe Simon Tolkien's Gen X.
Mm,
So
Gen X.
yeah,
Hmm.
so he's definitely in that limbo of I was sort of raised with some understanding of tradition, but also want to experiment uh, to new ends, thinking that I can do better than what came before.
Yep. Forget what they did. I can do it, obviously, so much better than they can.
While I think a lot of my generation, the sort of traditional element part of the generation, because there's a huge gap between this uber progressive side of the generation, and then there's this we need to fix what the heck's going on. Like
Mhm.
this is, everything's going to collapse part of the generation if we do not go back to some tradition.
Yeah. Yeah, there is that very very plainly seen, very obvious the split between those who recognize that the cause for a lot of problems in society right now, or the perceived problems in society, or the things that everybody are just feeling so terrible about, are those rejections of tradition, whatever form you want to call it, and those who just feel like the only cure for we're only in a low point because we haven't ascended to the perfection that is the progressive utopia. And then we're seeing that with the way all kinds of IPs have been destroyed. Star Wars, the Marvel ones, the Indiana Jones ones, which is about to get absolutely just annihilated. And the fact that all of those were kind of okay in their regard, but the and it looks like we'll move this right into the Lord of the Rings of Power. The first real battlefield where the people who love the greatest story ever told, as it's outside of obviously the Bible, the greatest story ever written by a man, is it has that fan base, it has that impact of generations. We talk about the Tolkien estate. What about families who have passed down this story between them? How many you when we talked about movies, Connor, you made the remark that it's your favorite Catholic film to watch, all three of them. And I agree with that. How many Catholics I see it on social media every year around Christmas time? What do when it's getting cold out? If they have a fireplace or something like that, what do? They get the fire on, they kick it on, and for a couple days, we all get engrossed and we all get lost in the very well crafted films of Peter Jackson. And so it's one of those um things that is so ingrained in, I guess you're right, the traditional house, the traditional silo, that it has become a flashpoint.
Yeah, the neo-Thomist has the house is on fire, and the traditionalists are the ones jumping out of the house, while everyone else is burning, inside. I
Right.
mean, I also like to think that the traditionalists are trying to put out the fire,
Yep. Yeah.
hopefully, and maybe trying to drag people out with, obviously not to sort of, not leave themselves vulnerable to that, but definitely they're trying to help people come out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or they're at least trying to point to the exit.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Yeah,
At least trying to
true.
point to the exit, like, this is how we get out of here.
Exactly. Okay, so we got the Rings of Power, which this was surprising to me when I was looking when I was preparing for the episode. So they were shopping around. The Tolkien estate was shopping around to basically find somebody to do a TV adaptation of the or have the rights to Lord of the Rings in TV format. Now, Amazon won this. Obviously, have the Rings of Power. It's an Amazon show, right?
Mm-hmm.
They weren't the highest bidder. Like, isn't that the most ridiculous thing? This goes to show what sort of I've been hypothesizing that Simon Tolkien and some of the other members of the Tolkien Society, though Christopher was still with them, though I do think in this, if Christopher had hung on for longer, this might have actually been a good thing in the end. But the problem is, Christopher didn't survive.
Mm-hmm.
He died, unfortunately. Pray for his soul. Um, Basically, Netflix was the highest bidder, and in some ways, I think we can all be glad that Netflix did not get the rights.
Why?
Maybe that would have been much worse.
I mean, is it because of the content that's put out on Netflix, and because the Rings of Power, from what I've heard, was it checked off all the woke boxes, Connor. So I find that very interesting. That, I mean, for me, between Amazon and Netflix, it's kind of like, choosing between Pepsi and Coke. So I'm interested to hear in why you think it was better that it went to Amazon instead of Netflix.
Well, I think Netflix has a bigger problem regarding some
Mm.
of the weird stuff that they've put out. They're all about the extremes.
Okay.
So it could have been a lot more there could have been sex
Yeah.
involved in their adaptations. There could have been uh sort of they could have been going for a more adult audience,
Okay.
while Amazon didn't go for an adult audience.
They were looking for intimacy coordinators for this show, right?
Yes, but that didn't it didn't turn into anything.
You think it was something that got leaked so it wouldn't happen? You know how somebody kind of throws that out there, where it's like, oh, they're thinking about doing this, so somebody kind of leaks it to the press to get the backlash going.
Maybe
Hmm.
that definitely told them stuff. It does seem like Amazon is trying in some ways to backpedal whenever they get bad results, though they're also like part of them is backpedaling, part of them is reasserting the fact that you're a racist if you didn't like the series. So they're talking sort of both out of both sides of their mouths.
Mm.
All right.
Yeah, they definitely did the fan baiting thing pretty well, which is interesting because if in some circles, Amazon is starting to get a reputation as almost a conservative alternative, and I will explain it because Jack Reacher, um, Jack Ryan, which is weird, Jack Reacher, Jack Ryan, and the Chris Pratt military Jack, the one written by Jack Carr. Don't give me the fact that they're all named Jack. I don't know. I guess it's something to be dealing with it, but they have that like patriotic, militaristic show thing going on right now. So they kind of have that going for them in that regard. So it's kind of interesting in that they're getting that reputation because of those shows. Are they? Not really. They're just not completely whacked out of their minds, those shows. Um, so I guess that could be why. But then they made this thing and it all just went absolutely out the window.
Indeed. And they didn't, I mean, one of the big things or one of the big problems with with the show was that they basically put in people that didn't know what they were doing or had no experience whatsoever regarding uh, doing this type of series.
Mm. Yeah, it was definitely a vanity project. It definitely was a vanity project where people were given license to essentially create something off of I can't get away from it. Every time I go in a show, somebody talks about Anthony. All right. It doesn't have to always be about him.
Technically, you just brought him up.
Maybe.
I didn't say anything.
That's true. That's true. But the idea of the vanity project, that everybody wants to not have their own vision because they don't have any. There are very few modern writers that are gifted in the ability to create anything. They're all trained to take a previous work and just infuse it with the message, if you will.
Yeah, critical drinker. The
Yep.
message.
The message. And there's that stunning lack of any real humility. I think I'll say that, Connor. There's a lack of humility on the part of these writers because they think they can do better than Tolkien.
Yeah, definitely. Now, what's interesting about this Amazon was willing to give the Tolkien state a lot more, which means they were able to give them more influence in the process of creating the show. Now, I think this is something Christopher argued for, and he won.
Yeah.
Now, then he died. My understanding is that they had they had an agreement with Amazon that Amazon had to follow according to the timeline, Tolkien's timeline. Basically, they couldn't change anything.
Mm-hmm.
They could only add, like new. If they wanted to do something new, they had to add something that worked within Tolkien's timeline.
Yeah, I see that how they're writing that. It was really about protecting the legacy, and that was a big thing there. And so I guess that's why people were a little bit. And so well, let me just skip that point. So I guess it really was a good thing at the beginning, from what it sounds like, because if Christopher was alive, we're looking at a whole different ball game. In fact, Connor, I'll throw this to you. Do you think his death kind of threw everybody into a tailspin because they were like, all right, Christopher's here, he's going to kind of lead the whole thing, and then because it takes years to develop. I mean, they bought it in 2018 and it didn't come to the screen until 2020, right? I didn't actually know when it came out. So it's 2 years of pre-production, hiring writers, hiring all these other kinds of stuff. And they're like, all right, we got Chris here. He'll shepherd us through.
It came out in 2022. So
Oh, so
that's that's how many years? That's 6
4,
years.
6 years from 2018 to 2022.
Oh, sorry. I thought 2017. So yeah.
Yeah, either one. It's either 5 or 4 years. So
Yeah,
they were like,
4
we
years.
have him and he'll get us through. And then he dies, and everybody's like, what do we do now? And they all looked at Simon, and he's like, I don't know what to do. You figure it out. I got to write this book about stepmom.
Well, okay. The thing is that Christopher, I don't think, was as active at this time. I think he had stepped away, so he was not holding things together necessarily. But if you're Amazon, you know that Christopher
He
is
can
going
still
to.
give you final approval on big things.
Well, he'll give
You
you
know?
the veto. He'll say no to
Yeah.
something that you do. Once he's gone, there's no one to say no to. And then you have Simon, who wants to sort of revolutionize things, it seems.
Well, he wants to put his mark on it. That's
Well,
that's how
yeah.
he's going to make his legacy. He can't do it through his books or his lawyering or anything else. It's going to be my version of Lord of the Rings, and it's going to be just as good as my grandfather's, and people are going to someday say my version is the definitive version and not his.
And he has to do this because he he has to do this because he is a Tolkien, and he feels obligated that he can't do anything else. Now, maybe that's because he can't do anything else. Maybe he's just kind of incompetent. Maybe he is competent and he's kind of locked himself into this belief. But he's already making tons of money from the Silmarillion sales and stuff like that. It's not like the Tolkien family is in need of money.
No.
And
I
of
mean,
course, yeah.
every year they make money off of people renting the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, though, I know there was lawsuits over the New Line movies and and that sort of thing, but I bet they still get money from that. So
Yeah.
we got this is how this is sort of the setup for the Rings of Power. Now, looking at hold on the sort of the application.
Mm.
So Simon Tolkien was a serious consultant. So that means he had a huge sort of influential aspect or influential um, part in the creation of it. And
And this is yeah.
basically, Amazon and the creators of the show used him as a way of saying, "Oh, we're following what the Tolkien estate wants, so therefore we are doing a good job."
Yeah, he was their buffer. So he was their cover for all that. And this is where not growing up, and we can be on Christopher and it can be on Simon or whatever the case may be, but not growing up steeped in the traditions or even just caring about. I mean, it seems like to Simon, and this is nothing against him. I mean, it's kind of like when your dad's a pro athlete or something like that, you're just kind of numb to it at some point because it's around you all the time. Like I'm sure Connor, if you and I were around this, we would go, this is just awesome because look at all this, and we got look at all this cool stuff with Tolkien and the notes, and he's like, yeah, I grew up with that stuff. Yeah, I grew up all looking at that, and the fact that he didn't take it seriously until he had to, which is kind of like trying to study for the test, the morning you found out there was a test.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's yep. Uh so we've got this article. So basically he really enjoyed Simon Tolkien really enjoyed his assisting Amazon Studios in connection with the series, and in particular working with the creators who had absolutely basically it basically wanted to make it as woke as possible.
You want to put a stamp on it.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the backdrop. This all of what we're talking about isn't so much about the new movies. But we're getting to that. Uh, so we're gonna do that. So we're gonna get into the what the new movies are and what we know about them, and we're gonna talk about how they might come about and whether or not we it's something we can look forward to, something we're gonna dread, and that
Hmm.
sort of thing.
Connor, there's a question in the chat I'd like to answer if you want to bring that one up real quick before we get into anything else, because I really want to talk
Sure.
about this. Sydney, that's a great question. And let me tell you this: when I was growing up in the great little state of Rhode Island, my father was a contractor. He was in construction, Barrett Building Company, and my dad passed away 13 years ago, 14 years ago, and I always wanted to take over that business, but I remember this to this day when I was 18, 19. I said, "Hey, Dad, let me follow you and follow in your footsteps." But he was insistent that I go to college and get a degree and have a backdrop and a backstop or whatever kind of word I'm trying to come up, backup plan in case it didn't work out well. Now, of course, my father fell sick and he died before I was able to actually work with him. So I would have taken over my father's legacy if I had the chance to. I was willing to do it. I had pride in that Barrett building name. Um, so I would have I wouldn't have written another book. I would have tried to safeguard a legacy. Because sometimes like you can be Michael Jordan's son, but if you're like 5'11, you're not going to be a basketball player, right? You can have the name, but you can't there is value in understanding your place. Maybe if your son has a child and he's like 6'5" as a basketball player, he can carry on the name and so forth. What's one of the lines that's often quoted? It's not a bad thing to celebrate a simple life. It is not a bad thing to be a steward. I know Stewart gets a bad name in, in the Lord of the Rings, especially in Return of the King, but there is value in being a steward for something. So that's a great question. Thank you for that. And now that I talked, Connor, let's get to your next segment here. I'm anxious to get into it.
Well, first, I wanted to say that I have no problem with somebody taking on the family business, sort of, and working in that if they feel qualified. I just don't think that you can go into this trying to make things better, trying to make a
Yeah.
better version of the same thing. If you want to make your own thing, go ahead. That's a I mean, I would never tell anyone not to write a book, write a novel or whatever. If anything, if it was me, I would probably write under a pseudonym
Yeah.
because if it was me, I'd be worried that somebody was going to be like Tolkien, like you might get a published way easier.
You're gonna get a lot more you're gonna get a lot more meetings using that last name than, trash can guy.
Especially as the like head of this society, this Tolkien estate. Basically, you have a bargaining chip
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
no one else does. So Christopher did things probably the best way possible. Now it just doesn't seem like he had any interest in writing himself, but he did his best to safeguard and to promote his father's work.
Yeah. I mean, you just brought up a great point of a pseudonym. Y'all know that Nicolas Cage is related to Francis Ford Coppola.
Really?
Yeah, I think Francis
Huh.
Ford Coppola is his uncle. Nobody knew that because he went under his own name. He did his own thing. Especially because, well, his uncle was like, "Nah, you're not using my name to do this kind of stuff." But still, there is that idea of, hey, you want to do this on your own. I think even Denzel Washington's kid is an actor now, and he doesn't use the Washington last name because he's trying to get it on his own merits. So there's a lot to be said that, hey, man, I'm gonna try this on my own.
Yeah,
So
definitely. So we got new Lord of the Rings movies. We're finally with the title of the episode.
only 37 minutes in, baby. Here we go.
Hey, there was a lot to get, a lot of background that people
Yes.
needed to know.
Yep.
Otherwise, a lot of this I don't think would make much sense.
Yep.
So I just want to say, first of all, the fact that this is coming out, this is starting to come out, is such a sort of attack on Amazon. It is it probably will destroy the Rings of Power show.
And nobody's sad about that.
If anyone, yeah, exactly. If anyone wanted a way to destroy the Rings of Power, you've got it. This is the perfect opportunity. Basically, people, some people watch the Rings of Power just because they want some Lord of the Rings content, but now there's going to be movies coming out, and they're like, I don't need to watch the Amazon show because I know more content's coming out anyways, for good or for ill.
So, if I may, I want to read the statement from Lee Guchard, who's the CEO of that Embracer Group.
Yep.
Said real quick, following our recent acquisition of Middle Earth Enterprises, we're thrilled to embark on this new collaborative journey with New Line Cinema and Warner Brothers Pictures, bringing the incomparable world of J.R.R. Tolkien back to the big screen in new and exciting ways. We understand how cherished these works are, and working together with our partners at New Line Cinema and Warner Brothers, we plan to honor the past, look to the future, and adhere to the strongest level of quality and production values. Connor,
Great.
is that not just jab, 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 jab right at Amazon?
It is, but it also, I wish it was even more. I wish it was like, we will like not just like we will also adhere to the philosophy of J.R.R. Tolkien. Sort of like more.
You just wanted to say no black elves. That's what you
Well,
wanted.
no,
I'm just, I'm just, I'm
no.
just
What I
kidding.
wanted to know is whether there would be bearded dwarves.
Oh, yeah. Or yep.
Female
Yeah.
dwarves, of course.
Well, we all know that is a thing. It's the beards.
That is a thing, yeah. It's a funny aspect. It's hilarious because it's their perfect transgender opportunity, but they didn't even take that.
Nope.
They're idiots.
Yeah, well, I mean, you saw how they blew how much money per episode on this on
I,
this series, so
I know
it didn't look
it's
like you had a bunch
crazy.
of geniuses in the pilot seat.
So on a Thursday earnings call, Warner, this is makes sense. It's they're wanting people to know that they're going to be making a lot of money. On a Thursday earnings call, Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav announced that newly installed studio leaders Mike DeLuca and Pam Abdi have brokered a deal to make multiple films based on the beloved J.R.R. Tolkien books. The projects will be developed through WB label New Line Cinema. So New Line Cinema is the same company or line that the first Lord of the Rings was made. So which is uh, they made a lot of money. That's all they're saying. No filmmakers have been attached to the project as yet, but in a statement to Variety, Jackson and his main Lord of the Rings collaborators, Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens, said Warner Brothers and Embracer have kept us in the loop every step of the way. So this is a big difference. If anybody has been following the drama with the Rings of Power, the so the Rings of Power basically ignored or sort of kicked out uh, any possibility of getting Peter Jackson's advice. They
Mhm.
also kicked out one of the major Tolkien scholars who who basically had been on who had been a part of all the other movies, had been part of the helping them get things right in that.
Well, Warner Brothers they can't mess around. They're so broke financially that they have to do this right. They
Well,
have to do this right.
I mean, it just goes to show you what are they trying to do? They drop this information on a earnings call,
Mhm. Yeah.
which I would assume that just means we don't worry about this earnings call. You know, don't worry about what we're making right now. We're gonna make a lot of money with a new Lord of the Rings setup.
I think the first 6, if you count The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I think it made about 6 billion, six
Yeah.
billion together. So they're like, yeah, when it's done right, people will pay, and they will pay lots and lots of money to go see this. Yeah,
Three
because the
billion worldwide.
for the trilogy for the first ones,
Yes.
for the first 3, and then I think it made around that for the second too. So it's definitely, I mean, the money's there, and as you said, the Tolkien estate, Middle Earth Enterprises, is not struggling for cash because there is still people buying anything that has Lord of the Rings merchandise on it. People grab it. So
Well, also, it doesn't seem that the Tolkien estate will have much probably as much influence in this rendition probably.
mhm.
That's my guess. We're not really sure about the deal, but that would be what I'm assuming, kind of like the movie rights were for the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. They didn't have a lot of influence, which in some ways was good because they don't know how to make a movie. They don't know how to make TV.
You're right. You're absolutely right. You got to find kind of like what you were saying before in as regards to passing off. Maybe Christopher should have passed it off to somebody like, I'm not saying is, maybe somebody like a Peter Jackson who just revered the source material and had it held such a special place for him. Like when they started filming the first 3, there was a quote he said. He said that we get the chance. We're going to treat this as actual history, not fantasy. This is actual history, and we're going to go on to the actual places where this history took place, and we're going to get to film it. And so that kind of reverence is something that you can't duplicate, and no amount of money can authenticate it. And that's something that Amazon learned in the worst way possible.
Now, Rick, I have a question for you. How So when someone brings up the Hobbit movies and sort of how they were a lesser adaptation, what would your response be on whether or not this will become just another Hobbit trilogy?
The Hobbits have this the trilogy has the a weird story behind it because the first three, the original trilogy took so much out of Jackson that because the grinding process of pre-production, finding place, filming it, editing it, going back and doing reshoots and blah 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 all, and then Warner Brothers is because with sequels to trilogies and stuff like that, the problem is you got to get them outside of a Top Gun Maverick. You got to get these things out as quick as possible so they stay in the public conscience. And at first, I think Jackson agreed to two. He was like, "Okay, I'll do two. I'll do two movies because The Hobbit's not very big, but you can probably get two films out of it because I think the original film was supposed to end off when they got to the lake, and then the second film was supposed to be everything that the other two films were." And so, but Warner Brothers was like, "Yeah, you can do two, but there's more money in three." And so he kind of got roped into trying just to stretch this thing out, and I think it's been how long since the Hobbit films? It's been at least 5-6 years. I'm probably wrong on this. Please
Probably
don't.
10.
Yeah, I was just trying to be conservative in that way. But it's been, you know what I'm trying to say, Connors? There's been distance.
Yeah, there's
He's
distance.
had time to recharge. He's had time to sit back. And I think the problem with the Hobbit movies was that the first three were given a lot of leeway and they were given the ability to breathe. The Hobbit ones were like, no, we need a new trilogy. We need to get that out there because this is a profitable series. It was looked at more like numbers on a spreadsheet than the first one was. And this one, I see the possibility that Jackson has also, if you're somebody like Jackson and just by just having another media creation, Lord of the Rings, that dampens your brand. Say what you will about the Hobbits, but they're at least palatable. Are they fantastic? No, but you can easily do all six. And it's kind of nice because you get the first bad three out of the way, and then you do get the crescendo to the last three. But by having the Rings of Power out there, that takes us your trilogy gets dinged, your work gets dinged because people will associate that further on. So maybe he sees it as, all right, I have my time off. I can clearly see that it's like a head coach coming back or like, I got to be the guy to do this because, or at least I got to, which maybe it's another way too, because he tried to with Amazon and they kicked him out. He's like, all right, well, blank you. I'll do it with these guys and we'll make sure we bury you. We'll bury this whole thing. So it could be a lot of factors. But the Hobbit question, I think it was just really the fact that the first three, the Return of the King got like 11 Oscar wins. So they were like, we need something quick. We need to keep the hype going, and we need a new trilogy, and we got to just start blasting these things out.
Yeah. Okay. Lauren makes an interesting point. Another series of Tolkien movies I won't be watching can't make anything better than the originals. I agree completely that you can't make anything better than the originals. See, the thing is, we haven't talked about what the movies actually will be of. They just have the rights now. It seems to me, at least what I would imagine would be the best strategy for them if they want to make if they want to make Lord of the Rings content. You do something either before the Lord of the Rings and before or yeah, before the Hobbit or in between, or you do something after. You do the conquests of Aragorn or something like that. Cuz you could theoretically get Viggo Mortensen back for an older Aragorn movie of his conquests and wars against sort of the eastern uh the
Yeah,
eastern tribes and stuff, which you are interesting enough, diversity.
there you
That'd be a
go.
way to get diversity in, which is the weird thing about the Rings of Power show. I was like, oh, okay, they'll just incorporate the eastern tribes and make them all and have different, sort of civil wars within them, so we can see that there are good, uh, good versions of these group and also bad versions. But there will also be a diversity in the show that they've always wanted and that sort of thing. But they didn't do that at all. They just made everyone diverse, which
because
was
they can't think outside. They can't stretch their imagination to do that kind of. They're like,
yeah,
well, people know the elves and people know these people, so we can't introduce anything else because the audience is too stupid. So we'll just give them what they want, but we'll just put a couple different paint colors on them.
yeah. It's not clear what they're actually going to make of the show though. So it could be a remake, but I
That would
don't think they'll do a remake, especially if they're working with Peter Jackson.
Warner
That'd be
Brothers, they can't afford a remake because this thing needs to make money.
Yeah, they desperately need it.
Warner Brothers
There's
can't
all
even advertise their films. That's how broke they are right now. So like
and this current CEO of Warner Brothers is all about the money.
yeah,
He has no, time for the woke stuff. He's axing content that isn't going to work left, right and center.
yeah,
If it doesn't make him money, he's going to axe it.
yeah. He hasn't got time for it because Warner Brothers, once proud Warner Brothers, is now it's a joke. It's on the verge of probably getting bought by Universal in 2 years. Because they're going to strip it for parts because that's what Zaslof's going to do because he's got to make money on this. Once AT&T bought it, it was dead because AT&T just used it as a vertical to try and bring people in. It wasn't treated as an entertainment company anymore. And so Zaslav's like, we got to put out franchises that make this company money. Please don't do any of this nonsense that's going to cause a backlash. That's going to make people not come pay us money to see it. So just he might even say like, do the original, but somewhere else in Middle Earth or do something like that.
Yeah.
And that would be fine.
A great story that they could do is the fall of Arnor, which is kind of the older brother of Gondor. So, and there's, you have the Witch King is the big bad with sort of Sauron lurking in the background but not really popping his ugly head in. So, and you can have like all these different sort of there's a lot of uh basically everyone participates in these wars with
Mhm.
Arnor in the north, and you can have just a lot of connective tissue while also getting into a bunch of new characters.
And a good place to start, and I think a real big indicator of how new Tolkien products and Lord of the Ring products are going to come out is going to be next year, April of next year, with the animated film Lord of the Rings: The War of the Rohirrim, which is set 183 years before the events of the Lord of the Ring movies. That's being produced by Warner Brothers. It's going to be released by Warner Brothers in theaters.
Oh, that is
So,
Warner Brothers. I wasn't
yep.
sure who was doing that.
Yeah, because
Is
Warner
that
Brother, yeah, they're going to be doing that. So that's going to be a huge indicator there of the direction that Warner Brothers wants to take, or will treat the property. Let's say that better.
was that supposed to be anime though?
It is animated. It
Okay.
is.
No,
Yep.
anime.
Oh, anime. Let me
Is it
see.
anime or
Oh,
is
it's
it
original
just
anime. Yeah, it's an original anime. My fault.
yeah.
Yep,
No, no,
that's good.
yeah. I mean animated and anime. I mean anime is just a kind of animation.
All the Rohirrim will have big eyes. That's because
It's gonna be all Japanese people.
they'll get some diversity there.
Yeah. Well,
Just
I mean, yeah, I don't know.
don't,
So I think they're just following the total trend towards Japanese art
yeah.
because this is the same way in the comics industry. Japanese comics are the only comics that are selling well, not because nobody likes comics, but because all the American comic book companies are woke as all get up.
Oh, Western comic companies are trash.
Yeah, well,
And that's
because
why.
they're owned by bigger companies, Warner
Mhm,
Brothers and Disney.
mhm. Yeah, and
So
so they're just absolutely getting just crushed. And so one anime booklet outsells the entire Western comics industry every time.
okay, Rick, what would make you watch this movie, or these movies that are said to be coming out?
So I would um I'd have to see who's involved. I'd have to see if Jackson is involved as an advisor or anything like that. That would give me hope. I'd have to see the reaction of scholars of people who have really have a lot more influence or a lot more intelligence on the subject than me.
Not the
Uh,
fake scholars, right?
no,
Not
no, no, like
no.
the real ones, like
Yeah.
the guys and the gals. Also, you can tell like when people were talking about they would put pictures up between the Lord of the Ring films back in, the early 2000s and the way the armor looks and the care and everything that was put into it versus like this show that's supposed to be the most expensive show of all time and the armor looked like it was 3D printed on like a booklet. It really like the production value really, I guess, Connor, the care and like a lot of things, the reverence that is being given to the source material. If you can sense it, and it'll all, I guess, come with that first trailer and casting announcements and how that comes. Just really with stuff like this, I'm gonna have to bank my opinion on the fact that Warner Brothers can't afford, like I've said 4 times, they can't afford to make a bad film. Jackson looks like he's gonna get involved. He's gonna step back in, and really, like you said, it kind of also depends on the story they pick, right? Where they decide to jump this off of. And I'm interested to see the War of the Rohirrim because I think that's a good setup to see if they're like, oh, this one did really well. The reaction was very well to it, and people like this. So maybe this is the kind of thing we should pursue going forward.
Yeah. You talked about sort of armor and quality of sort of production and stuff like that, which the so you read sort of that them slighting Amazon and
Mm-hmm.
how poorly the production is, which is crazy because they poured so much money into it. But with that, the armor from Rings of Power was absolutely terrible looking.
It was
It was
awful.
it looked like plastic,
Yeah, yeah, it
and it
was.
probably was.
I think plastic might be too much. I think it was paper mache that was
They
painted to look like plastic.
they put so much effort on the sort of CGI regarding the sort of the scenery, which also looked just fake. It just that just shows like Peter Jackson was going for history,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they were going for like
fantasy.
not just fantasy, but uh just on something that has no grounding in anything.
Yeah, almost mystical if that's what we're kind of looking at, or otherworldly, and just you could have thrown a bunch of styrofoam buildings up and painted them to look like they were rocks, and people would have. I mean, there's so many tricks that Hollywood has learned over the 100 years that it's existed to fool you into thinking that things that are not very expensive look expensive, and you don't need to. And the problem is you don't need to CGI everything. We're seeing that with the Marvel films, and we're seeing that with all the heavy reliance on CG. I'd like to see, when you ask me about that, I'd like to see a film that is more ground based, more practical,
Yeah.
and not heavily. Obviously, you need CGI for stuff, but not everything. Like you don't have to CGI in like a sword or like or like shoes or stupid things like that. I'd like to actually see some practical stuff because if I CGI'd a sandwich in here. No, you can give him the sandwich to eat. He doesn't have to actually like CGI all this stuff in. So I think I'd like to see something more in line with the originals where it feels real instead of artificial.
Yeah. And that's so true is that if it seems artificial, if it seems this sort of out of this world in some sense, not like impressive, like beautiful, but like out of this world and artificial, it's just not going to work well. Tolkien was very descriptive.
Hmm.
So he knew what he wanted to see. So make what he kind of wanted to see, and that's kind of what, Peter Jackson was going for. I mean, he not that everything Peter Jackson did was perfect or anything, but it was going for what Tolkien tried to do, but in a different medium. And I
Yeah.
think that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, I don't want it. I don't want the end of this show to sound. I want to say at the end of this that we didn't. This is not a Peter Jackson hagiography on how amazing he is. He didn't. There were some things like the Aragorn storyline was a little questionable. I understand from a writing standpoint how it kind of gave him an arc and all this. I mean, nothing was perfect in there. And obviously, you saw with the Hobbit films when a guy gets either exhausted or a little bit too much authority on something, he can definitely go a little wayward. But at this point, compared to what we saw after that, I think we're like, yeah, we'll go back. We'll go back. It's okay. We'll go back.
Arwen uh taking the place of Glorfindel, showing up with her sword and stuff like that, and being kind of a warrior princess and that sort of thing, and they got a a decent amount of what's the female Rohirrim? Eowyn. They
Oh,
got
yep.
Eowyn's story pretty wrong in a lot of different ways, though. I mean, it ended the same and it ended properly. It just there were sort of they didn't reveal why she was doing what she was doing and that
Yeah.
it was a bad thing, that she was trying to be a man, basically.
Yeah.
It not good trying to be a man.
Yeah.
And just it was the whole thing about like I am no man, that was just providential. That was God using, ill things to bring about the ends he needed.
Yeah. Yeah, but also, yeah, you're 100% correct on all that stuff. But we're also looking at the fact that it makes sense. Then they took these massive novels as detailed as they are and made a cohesive story out of them.
That's
I think that's
impressive.
why I think that's why people give them a pass because they're like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here that's not the books, but it tells the essential themes. I think that's what you're really looking for when you're trying to translate from one medium to the other. Is that does it catch the themes right? Because really, it's about Samwise Gamgee being the baddest dude on the planet and being the entire Fellowship. That's as long as we get that across, then I think we're going to be okay. And obviously, that's the inside joke where you see the meme with the
The
Fellowship at
100%. Yeah.
100% and then the Fellowship at 99%.
Yep.
So but it's really about themes and plot lines.
And plot lines, yes, perfect for the show. So I want to end on this note. So
Okay.
we've got this quote from Peter Jackson. We made a promise to ourselves at the beginning of the process that we weren't going to put any of our own politics, our own messages, or our own themes into these movies. In a way, we were trying to make these films for him, Tolkien, not for ourselves.
Yeah. And that's the attitude there's a humility there. There's a humility there that you must have when you take on something like that. And I think maybe that's what we're looking for. Maybe we're not looking for Peter Jackson. We're looking for somebody else to just be like, listen, I'm honored to be able to take this mantle up and I'm going to do it for him. And I'm going to honor his vision, not mine.
Yeah, if someone takes this mentality and they are good at what they do, they will do a good job. And
Yeah.
they have to do it honestly, and they can't do it from a perverse sort of like a perverse attitude. Like you can't be like they can't say that and be a Marxist or something like that. Like they can't be secretly trying to put in their own ideology just under the radar.
I want to honor Tolkien's legacy, so Arwen's going to be a lesbian. And it's like,
Exactly. It's like, wait, what?
it's
Like
like what?
Tolkien would have wanted this.
Yeah, everybody's an atheist now. And so it's just yeah, it's exactly right.
Yeah, anyone. Yeah, prepping for heaven. It's got it. Agendas are not allowed.
That's right. Just the
Not in,
story.
not in my cinema.
Yeah.
Oh, Rick, you got
Yes.
this.
This is a screen that is green. As you can see, my fingers move a little bit because it doesn't catch it. It's actually a green screen. So as I rip against CGI, I am
Yeah,
I
exactly.
am
And that
technically
and that actually you sent me an image for the episode, and that made it more difficult.
yeah, I apologize. I don't have a lot. I am not like certain other hosts of certain other shows that take many a photo of themselves. So for you to ask me for a thumbnail, I'm like, okay. That's all I got.
Well,
Yeah.
you may not be thinking that way of advertising, but I have links in the description to Rick's stuff, so go check that out. Daily mag dump and the news from the pew, and please like, share, comment, and subscribe on this episode. I know there are a lot of people looking for news on Tolkien and stuff like that, but people aren't going to be able to get it normally the way YouTube's working, it's just not possible. So the only way this is happening is if the people watching, you guys, people who watch Plotlines, share, to people in person, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, anywhere that you guys share things, share this and leave a comment after the episode's done, and hopefully YouTube will start sharing it more, or at least, sort of that will help. So, Rick,
Absolutely.
thank you for coming on.
Connor, the honor is always mine, man. I'm always super happy and grateful to be here, man. Great time.
Well, you're a great guest.
Mhm.
And upcoming next week, we're going to have Gavin Ashenden on
Nice.
to discuss the Anglican Communion and sort of its collapse and how that might influence our evangelization of Protestants, as well as on my Discord. So if you go down, there's a link to the Discord. I'm going to be doing basically a chat, sort of a voice chat conversation with everyone in that Discord once a week on different topics. So if you join the Discord, you'll get access to that, and you can ask me questions and participate in the Plotlines community in a more consistent way, instead of waiting for more content to come out, or not every episode is a live stream, so you don't always get to interact as much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a
So,
great idea. That'll be great.
yeah. So thank you all for watching. Thank you again, Rick, for coming on. Anything you want to say before we go?
No, man, it was a lot of fun. I appreciate it, man. And let's just hope for some good stuff. Let's just hope for some good Tolkien stuff that we can enjoy.
Alrighty. God bless everyone.
God bless everybody.